Amidst a barren, rocky desert wasteland, the scorching noon heat makes the air shimmer violently, suffocating all life. From the western horizon, a massive strip of opaque yellow dust rolls up, obscuring even the harsh sunlight. It is not a natural sandstorm, but a sign of approaching destruction. The thundering sound of tens of thousands of hobnailed boots pounding the hard ground creates a dull, heavy sound, continuous like distant rolling thunder, signaling the presence of over 80,000 main force troops of the Western Empire. This army stretches over 5 miles of road, moving with terrifying iron discipline. Leading are scout cavalry units with shining armor reflecting the glaring sunlight, followed by blocks of heavy infantry carrying large rectangular shields and sharp short spears. The standard flags embroidered with the eagle symbol flutter in the hot, dry wind. The sole target of this giant army is a solitary rocky mountain, standing sheer and imposing amidst the plain, where the last rebels are holding out on the flat summit. When the great army approaches the foot of the mountain, they do not rush to send troops climbing the sheer cliffs. Following the command from deep, heroic horn blasts echoing through the valley, the legions begin to spread out, executing a cold, methodical encirclement process. Thousands of tents are erected quickly in perfect order, divided into 8 main camps surrounding the mountain base. The sound of hammers driving stakes, the shouting of overseers, and the sound of clashing metal disturb the formerly desolate region. Heavy horse-drawn wagons carrying food and timber and disassembled parts of siege engines rumble into assembly positions. From the mountain peak over 400 meters high, the defenders look down to see only a sea of people and steel, gradually tightening its grip on their lives. The disparity in force is absolute. At the foot of the mountain are 80,000 elite troops armed to the teeth, while on the peak there are less than 1,000 people, including women and children, with crude weapons looted from previous battles. However, the ruggedness of the sheer cliffs on all 4 sides is the most terrifying natural defensive wall. The Imperial troops understand that, no matter how numerous they are, they cannot fly to the mountain peak. Meanwhile, at the command center at the foot of the mountain, the Imperial generals begin to observe the terrain, their scrutinizing eyes searching for any gap in this natural fortress. They did not come here to negotiate. They came to execute a total purge, no matter how long it takes. Just as dawn breaks, instead of the war drums urging a charge, the space resounds with the sound of picks and shovels and the clashing of wood and stone. The Imperial commanders have made a cruel but calculated decision. They will not attack immediately, but will slowly strangle the opponent. Tens of thousands of soldiers shed their heavy armor, switching to the role of construction laborers, starting to dig up the arid land surrounding the mountain base. Under the strict supervision of military engineers, a massive siege wall system, gradually takes shape, stretching continuously for over 6 miles, enveloping the entire perimeter. This wall is built of tightly stacked rubble stone, packed tight with rammed earth inside, reaching a height of over 3 meters and thick enough for 2 guards to walk abreast on top. In front of the wall, a deep trench 2 meters wide is dug into the hard rock, filled with sharp spikes whittled from hardwood, turning the mountain base area into a dead zone with no escape. Meanwhile, at key points on the siege wall, towering wooden watchtowers are erected at breakneck speed. A total of over 10 watchtowers are positioned, each tower spaced exactly 1 crossbow shot apart, ensuring there are absolutely no blind spots. From atop these high towers, snipers with heavy crossbows are always on duty day and night, ready to take down any figure daring to venture down to the mountain base to find a way out. On the rocky peak, the defenders witness the siege tightening hour by hour. With rising despair, they try to organize small groups sneaking down steep ravines at night, aiming to sabotage the works or find a way to communicate with the outside. However, every effort is broken without mercy. Torchlight from Imperial night patrols sweeps brightly across the mountain base. The sound of hunting dogs barking signals the intruder's position, followed by rains of arrows tearing through the wind from the darkness. In the eastern sector, where the terrain is flatter, the Imperial army also builds a second outer wall, to protect their camp from any surprise attacks by neighboring desert tribes wanting to break the siege. The 2 layers of walls clamp tight around the mountain like iron pincers. Food and water supply sources are completely cut off. Not a single grain of rice, not a drop of water can pass through this airtight blockade system. Finally, when the last stone slab is placed into position, the encirclement is complete. The mountain now becomes an isolated island amidst an ocean of enemies. The sound of hammers falls silent, giving way to the deadly silence of the siege. Only the sound of wind whistling through rock crevices remains, and the hungry eyes of tens of thousands of Imperial soldiers waiting for the exhausted prey. The patience of the Imperial generals begins to run out, as the sun scorches the desert day after day, with no sign of surrender from the mountain peak, refusing to just sit and wait for hunger to do the work for them. A probe attack order is issued on the morning of the 20th day of the siege. 3 shock troop units equipped with light armor and mobile round shields begin to follow the only trail leading to the summit. A narrow and winding path like a goat's intestine, perched precariously on the sheer western cliff face. The climb takes place in extreme tension. The soldiers must move in single file, backs pressed against the cliff face, feet groping for each slippery stone step. When the vanguard climbs about a third of the way, hell pours down from above. The defenders, having prepared piles of large and small boulders, simultaneously shove them into the abyss. Boulders weighing hundreds of pounds roll thunderously, smashing into the cliff walls, creating ear-splitting explosions, then shattering into thousands of sharp fragments, spraying like a deadly rain. The Imperial formation breaks immediately. Fragile wooden shields cannot withstand the weight of rocks rolling from great heights, crushed along with the arms holding them. Screams echo throughout the canyon as dozens of soldiers slip or are knocked by rocks straight into the abyss below. Blood stains the sharp rocky outcrops. Bodies lie scattered at the bottom of the abyss like broken puppets. The archer squads below try to return fire to cover, but the angle is too steep, causing arrows to lose momentum and fall back, posing danger to their own troops. Meanwhile, on the northern face, another effort using rope ladders and iron grappling hooks to climb lower ledges also meets with disaster. The defenders on the ramparts simply lean out to cut the ropes, or pour boiling oil down on those hanging in midair. The Imperial soldiers ignite like living torches, letting go and falling to the ground in the helplessness of their comrades. Every direct approach effort is brutally broken by the treacherous terrain, realizing casualties rising to hundreds without touching even a finger to the city gate. The Imperial commanders are forced to order a retreat. The retreat horn sounds mournfully in the late afternoon. Looking up at the imposing impregnable fortress, they understand that conventional force is meaningless. The eyes of military engineers now turn to a natural rock outcrop protruding in the west, about 100 meters lower than the peak. A crazy but ambitious plan is drawn up. If they cannot climb the mountain, they will pile earth to raise the ground level with the peak. Orders from the high command are transmitted like a wave spreading across the 8 camps, turning the giant war machine into a great construction site like never before. The goal is no longer melee slaughter, but conquering nature. On the western slope, where the cliff has the gentlest gradient, tens of thousands of soldiers and laborers begin to assemble, bringing picks, shovels, bamboo baskets, and large logs felled from forests dozens of miles away. The work begins with terrifying clamor. Thousands of people form endless long chains, passing hand-to-hand heavy baskets of earth and stone dug from neighboring hills. At the cliff base, a massive foundation is shaped by old ironwood trunks driven deep into the ravine, interlocked tightly to form a solid skeletal frame to keep the soil from sliding. The sound of sledgehammers driving stakes thunders mixed with the shouting of overseers, creating a chaotic symphony amidst the desert. As the volume of poured earth and stone increases day by day, a giant artificial ramp begins to rise from the abyss, slowly reaching up towards the peak like an earthen python slithering up to hunt prey. Thick dust rises covering the whole sky, dyeing the armor and flesh of the laborers yellow. The scorching heat makes sweat flow in streams down the soldiers' backs, mixing with dust to form a layer of slimy mud right on their bodies. but the work pace does not decrease for even a moment. Meanwhile, on the peak, the defenders quickly realize the enemy's crazy intention. Not letting the construction take shape, they concentrate their entire force to the west. Large boulders are once again rolled to the edge of the cliff, rolling thunderously down to the construction site. Rains of arrows, sharp javelins, and ceramic jars containing waste and pitch are thrown down in torrents onto the crowd working below. To cope, the Imperial Army deploys a tight defensive tactic. Heavy infantry units not involved in digging stand in horizontal lines, raising large rectangular shields high, overlapping them to form solid mobile roofs. A layer of steel scales shielding the laborers below. The sound of rocks hitting the shield face thunders like a rainstorm. Many shields are dented or shattered under the weight of boulders, causing the shield bearers to break arms or shatter shoulders. But immediately the person behind steps up to replace them to maintain the protective roof. Under the protection of the forest of shields and iron will, the ramp continues to rise inch by inch every day. Millions of baskets of earth have been poured, leveling the deep ravines. The perseverance of the Imperial Army is so terrifying that even the defenders holding out on high have to shudder, seeing the ground beneath the enemy's feet gradually rising to their eye level. Slow but unstoppable. When the earth and stone ramp reaches halfway up the mountain, the distance between the two sides narrows to within a strong arm's throw. The construction war now turns into a bloody confrontation between fire and wood. From the top of the ramparts, the defenders no longer use simple boulders. Bubbling cauldrons of oil and torches soaked in resin are thrown down continuously, turning the slope under construction into a blazing furnace to incinerate the road's timber reinforcement system. The smell of burnt flesh and the pungent odor of asphalt rise strongly in the stifling hot air. Imperial engineers scream in agony when hit by boiling oil, flesh blistering and peeling instantly. The fire ignites the dry wooden piles, threatening to collapse months of arduous labor. Thick black smoke billows up, obscuring the vision, causing the laborers to panic and collide with each other. Many slip and roll down the unfinished slope, buried under landslides of earth and stone. Facing the critical situation, the Imperial generals immediately deploy specialized firefighting units forward. These people push large water barrels in wet sand, risking their lives to extinguish fires under a rain of arrows. At the same time, a new technical solution is deployed. Mobile houses made of thick oak wood, roofs covered with wet raw ox hides and thin metal sheets are being pushed up to shield the workers. These structures slither up the slope like giant beetles, enduring all the bricks, stones, and fire in place of the people below. At positions on both sides of the slope, elite Imperial archer squads also begin organizing a counterattack to reduce pressure on the construction team. Thousands of arrows are launched in a rainbow trajectory, pouring down on the ramparts like a dense black rain. Although difficult to cause significant damage to the enemy hiding behind stone walls, the high density of flying arrows force the defenders to bow their heads low, interrupting their pace of stone throwing and oil pouring. The hiss of oil meeting water, the sound of burning wood breaking, and the incessant shouting of commands resounds. Under the protection of the wet leather armor and the archers' support, the ramp still plods forward inch by inch every day. Charred or crushed corpses are quickly dragged out, thrown aside into a makeshift mass grave, and immediately the living jump in to take their place. The Imperial war machine runs on blood, and it allows no stopping until it reaches the edge of the enemy's ramparts. To end the persistent harassment from above and clear the way for the final construction phase, the Imperial command decided to unleash its strongest firepower. On the flat earthen platforms just leveled halfway up the ramp and nearby mountain spurs, military engineers begin to assemble 60 heavy catapults. These machines have giant wooden frames, using the tension from bundles of rope braided with tightly twisted animal tendons, capable of throwing rounded stones weighing over 50 kilograms for hundreds of paces. When the red flag is waved, the sound of the string snapping resounds sharply like a thunderbolt in a clear sky. Dozens of dark stone blocks simultaneously tear through the wind and soar into the sky, drawing deadly curves before striking the mountain peak. The horrific impact shakes the entire wall, Stone bullets with terrible kinetic energy smash through the wooden and thin stone fortifications of the defenders, crushing anyone unlucky enough to stand in the wrong place into fragments mixed with stone dust. Not just stopping at boulders. Giant mechanical crossbows, the kind that fire long spear-like arrows, were also brought into the fight. Arrows longer than 2 meters tipped with sharp iron, screaming horrific sounds as they fly through space, piercing through even the shields and armor of the rebels. Their piercing power is so great it can pin 2 soldiers standing in line together to the earthen wall behind. Under the constant rain of stone bullets and spear arrows pouring down from morning till night, the defenders on the walls are completely suppressed. They no longer dare to poke their heads out to throw stones or pour oil as before, but are forced to lie flat behind the thick walls, or retreat deep inside the underground bunkers to preserve their forces. Stone dust thickly covers the fortress, turning this place into a land of death, where the sky only brings disaster. Taking advantage of that absolute fire support, the construction team below accelerates the progress to a dizzying rate. No longer hindered by resistance from above, they comfortably raise the height of the ramp for the final few meters. Now the earthen road has reached nearly to the edge of the ramparts, forming a broad avenue leading straight to the death door of the defenders. At the same time, at the foot of the slope, a giant wooden monster begins to roll its wheels, preparing for the decisive blow. After nearly 2 long years with the sweat and blood of tens of thousands poured down, the artificial ramp has finally been completed. It lies there, towering against the cliff, a wonder of brutality and the will to conquer, paved with flat stones on the surface in preparation for the final move. On the morning of the 10th of April, the air on the battlefield became thick, suffocatingly still. All eyes from both sides are fixed on the foot of the slope, where a giant war machine never seen before begins to move. It is a great 9-story siege tower, built from the strongest old ironwood logs, rising higher than the walls of the defenders on the peak. To resist fire attacks, the entire front and sides of the tower are covered with thin iron sheets and thousands of fresh ox hides still dripping with blood, turning it into a mobile fortress invulnerable to fire. Inside the belly of the tower, hundreds of the most elite soldiers, equipped with thick armor and short weapons, are holding their breath waiting for the fateful moment. The signal whistle sounds, tearing through the silence. Thousands of laborers and burly soldiers begin to strain, pushing from behind. Combined with a system of pulleys and ropes pulling from the front, the giant tower weighing hundreds of tons shudders, emitting eerie, creaking sounds of wood grinding against each other, then slowly rolling the first wheel rotations up the ramp. The chants of yo-heave from thousands of people blend together, creating a majestic rhythm driving the wooden monster to climb higher. Meanwhile, on the top of the tower at the highest floor, a team of archers and ballista operators have taken their positions. The altitude advantage is now reversed. From this position, they can see clearly inside the rebels' walls. As soon as the tower climbs halfway up the slope, arrows and stone bullets from the top of the tower begin to pour down on the defenders hiding behind the walls. For the first time in 2 years, the Imperial Army can shoot down the enemy from above, causing the defensive formation on the wall to fall into disorder and be unable to lift their heads to stop the tower's advance. The giant vehicle continues to advance relentlessly. Every meter it crosses is a meter narrowing the hope of survival for the people on the mountain. The tower's giant shadow stretches out, covering the ramparts like a death scythe descending. When the wheels roll to the final flat stretch near the edge of the wall, the sound of wood and stone clashing stops. The tower stands tall, face to face with the stone wall, separated by a deadly space of less than 5 steps. A large ironclad plank bridge on the 9th floor begins to be lowered slowly, preparing to bridge a bloody path straight into the heart of the fortress. The iron chains of the pulley system screech piercingly. The ton-heavy ironclad plank bridge from the highest floor of the siege tower slams down onto the stone wall edge. The powerful impact shakes an entire section of the wall, throwing up clouds of dust and stone debris into the air. Immediately from the belly of the tower, the Imperial heavy shock troops, with large shields covering their bodies and short swords in hand, pour out like a flood. The battle cries mixed with the sound of clashing metal create a horrific, chaotic sound at the narrow intersection between life and death. The defenders on the wall, though far less equipped, threw themselves into melee with the frenzy of those with no way back. They used long spears, stone axes, and even red-hot iron bars to poke straight into the gaps between the opponent's shields. On the precarious plank bridge, only about 5 meters wide, two masses of people pushed and killed each other brutally. Fresh blood splatters onto the wooden walls of the siege tower and dyes the stone of the ramparts red. Wounded or pushed back soldiers have no place to fall. They are forced off the bridge edge, falling freely into the 100-meter deep abyss below, their screams fading amidst the whistling wind. Realizing they could not repel the dense armored infantry of the Empire with manpower, the rebels turned to destruction tactics. Dozens of large ceramic jars filled with kerosene and resin are thrown relentlessly at the front of the siege tower. Next, blazing torches are launched forward. Flames erupt violently as the oil spreads, licking the ox hides covering the tower. Thick black smoke billows up, smelling of burnt flesh and scorched leather, stinging the eyes and suffocating the fighting soldiers. However, the Imperial Army had anticipated this. From small windows on the tower sides, professional firefighting teams immediately doused the fire points with large buckets of water mixed with vinegar. The water-soaked fresh ox hides, though charred and smoking heavily, still resiliently protect the inner wooden frame from catching fire. The battle for every inch of wood takes place fiercely between red fire and cold water, while the bloody melee is taking place at the top of the tower to attract the attention of the defenders. Then at the bottommost floor, the real monster begins to wake up. A giant battering ram, hanging on ropes as thick as a man's wrist, begins to be pulled back by burly soldiers inside the tower to gain momentum. The ironclad ram head, cast in the shape of a ram's head weighing thousands of kilograms, surges forward, delivering a thunderous blow to the foot of the wall. Boom! The dull collision sound like the earth and sky cracking resounds, shaking the entire mountain, signaling the inevitable collapse of the final protective shell. Under the rhythmic control of hundreds of laborers inside the tower belly, the battering ram continues to operate like a giant iron heart, pumping each destructive beat into the poor fortress wall. After dozens of consecutive blows, dry cracking sounds begin to resound, signaling the fracture of the stone structure. A large section of the outer wall, already shaken by previous stone rains, suddenly collapses thunderously, dragging a thick white cloud of dust that obscures all vision. The cheers of the Imperial Army resound across the mountainside. They tighten their grip on weapons, preparing to flood through the gap to slaughter. However, as the stone dust just settles, a stunning sight appears before the attackers, immediately extinguishing their joy. Behind the fallen hard stone shell was not a wide entrance or paved streets of the inner city, but a second wall, towering and strange. This wall was not built of boulders, but constructed from large tree trunks stacked horizontally and vertically. The gaps in the middle were packed tight with soft earth and well-compressed small gravel. The Imperial generals, though surprised, still ordered to continue the destruction. The iron ram head was again pulled back and launched forcefully, but this time, instead of the crisp explosion of breaking stone, only a dull, suffocating sound resounded. The timber and soft earth structure of the new wall worked perfectly. Instead of rigid resistance only to be crumbled like stone, this wall was flexible and absorbed the entire impact force. When the ram head hit, the layer of earth and wood sank deep inside, neutralizing the terrible kinetic energy, then elastically returning almost intact when the ram was withdrawn. The Empire's most modern siege engines suddenly became useless before the survival intelligence of those at the end of their rope. Further thrusts only made the earth inside the wall more compressed rather than causing any cracks or collapse. The harder it hit, the deeper the ram head sank and was in danger of being stuck in that thick plastic mass of earth. From atop the soft wall, the defenders took advantage of the enemy's confusion to counterattack. Long spears and boulders continued to be thrown down into the gap just revealed when the stone wall collapsed. The army controlling the ram below, now losing the cover of the old stone wall, became exposed targets. Blood again spilled right at the threshold of a victory that seemed within reach. The battle fell into a strange stalemate. Muscle power and hard steel were completely helpless before the flexibility and stubbornness of the earth. Facing the stalemate of the battering ram, the Imperial Supreme Commander on the high tower carefully observes the structure of the new wooden wall. A cruel smile appears as he realizes its fatal weakness. The soft earth wall reinforced with dry tree trunks taken from deep forests. It is an excellent material for absorbing impact force, but a great bait for flames. Meanwhile, a strong wind from the desert is beginning to blow up to the mountain peak, heading straight toward the fortress. The fire attack order is issued immediately. The Imperial archer squads change targets. They wrap arrowheads with cloth soaked in resin and pitch, ignite them and fire simultaneously at the wooden wall. Thousands of fire arrows fly through the wind, forming a bright red silk ribbon across the sunset sky. As soon as they touch the dry wood and the straw lining in the earth wall, the fire begins to catch. Initially only small spots of fire, but thanks to the parched desert wind's help, they quickly erupt into a ferocious sea of fire. The defenders frantically pour water down to extinguish the fire, but the wind is too strong and pushes the flames across the wall's surface. However, an unexpected incident occurred. The wind direction suddenly shifted, pushing the aggressive flames back toward the Imperial siege tower. Smoke and fire enveloped the front of the tower, making Imperial soldiers panic and retreat to avoid being burned alive. Joyful cheers resounded from the rebels' side. They believed the gods had heard their prayers. However, their luck did not last for long. Like an arrangement of destiny, the wind shifts direction once more, blowing harder than ever toward the fortress. This time, the fire is no longer hindered. It slithers over the earth wall, licking the wooden fortifications inside and spreading quickly into the defenders' houses. The reinforced wooden wall is no longer an obstacle but becomes a giant furnace, gradually collapsing under 1,000-degree heat. The popping sounds of burning wood mixed with the collapsing of rammed earth structures. The firelight illuminates the entire desert sky, turning night into day. The Imperial generals order the army to retreat a short distance on the ramp to preserve their forces, while simultaneously forming a formation to tightly block the exit. They no longer need to attack further, for the fire is doing the work instead of swords and spears. Seeing the fortress submerged in a sea of bright red fire and pitch-black smoke, the Imperial army understands the enemy's final defensive line has been officially wiped out. A terrifying silence begins to shroud the mountain peak. Only the roaring fire and the crumbling of a soon-to-be-extinguished dynasty remain. When night falls completely, the aggressive fire from before begins to subside, leaving a desolate scene with smoldering red-hot ashes. The heat still rises intensely, distorting the space around the breach of the burnt-out wall. Instead of rushing the troops in immediately in the darkness, the Imperial command decided to order the troops to remain stationary. They set up a dense steel shield barrier right at the top of the ramp. The mechanical crossbow team still hold their bowstrings tight, ready to take down anyone trying to escape through the gray smoke. A strange silence shrouds the mountain peak, unlike the commotion, screams, and clashing weapons of the previous days. No sound of children crying, no shouting from the rebel patrol units, nor any attempt to rebuild the defensive barriers. Only the sound of the desert wind whistling through rock crevices and the sparse popping of half-burnt wooden logs remain. A sense of unease spreads through the Imperial ranks. They are all too familiar with bloody breakouts or pleas for surrender, but this silence carries a terrible spiritual weight. At the camp at the foot of the mountain, senior officers pace anxiously. They observe the summit using primitive binoculars, trying to find a sign of life. Flickering torchlights inside the fortress occasionally appear, then disappear, evoking images of ghosts lurking amidst the ruins. A few theories are proposed. Perhaps the rebels are concentrating forces for a suicidal counterattack at dawn, or they have found another secret escape route through the rear cliff. On the southern flank, border patrols report no movement on the remote slopes. The encirclement remains tight without a single gap. In the tense wait, the Imperial soldiers sit leaning against their shields, hands still not leaving their sword hilts. They look toward the horizon, longing for the first light of dawn to end this long siege. However, the silence behind that ruined wall seems to be swallowing all space, turning the Empire's coming victory into something melancholy and mysterious. When the morning star begins to fade and a pale purple strip of light appears in the east, the signal horn for the final general assault sounds, breaking the terrifying silence. Tens of thousands of troops stand up, forming square formations, beginning to take cautious steps through the still hot layers of ash, to advance inside the fortress where a horrific truth awaits them. When the first rays of the new day cross the eastern mountain ranges, illuminating the ash-covered ground, tens of thousands of Imperial infantry begin to advance through the whole of the burnt-out wall. They move in a tortoise formation, shields raised high above heads and spears pointing forward, ready for a bloody melee in the narrow alleys of the fortress. Yet not a single arrow is fired, nor a single stone poured down. The space inside the fortress is so quiet that only the sound of wind whistling through the stone corridors can be heard, and the sound of hobnailed boots pounding the parched ground. Advancing deeper into the center, a horrific sight gradually appears before the most battle-hardened soldiers. In the squares, in the stone houses, and along the small paths, bodies lie scattered everywhere. They are not the bodies of warriors fallen in battle, but a systematic destruction. Men, women, and children lie side by side in neat positions, blood dried dark on the ground. The rebels, instead of surrendering to slavery or shameful execution, chose to end their own lives and their loved ones. At the rebel leader's headquarters on the highest peak, the Imperial Army found only the ashes of grain stores and precious documents burned earlier. All wealth, jewelry, and weapons were destroyed or thrown into the abyss. The Imperial soldiers stand silent in the fortress courtyard, looking around the solid structures they spent nearly 2 years and tens of thousands of lives to reach. Their victory is now only an empty fortress and silent corpses. No victory cheers, no prisoners to lead back in parade, only an eerie emptiness. At the foot of the mountain, smoke from the military camp still rises, but the joy of the army of over 80,000 men has completely vanished. The 24-month siege ends in a melancholy and silent atmosphere. The Imperial generals order the battlefield to be cleared, the victims cremated, and the troops to prepare for withdrawal. The giant ramp, a symbol of Imperial power and will, begins to be invaded by the desert and wind-blown sand, leaving a permanent long scar on the rocky cliff. As the giant army begins to shift and leave the desert wasteland, the rocky mountain returns to its inherent solitude. The ruins of the siege tower and the crumbled wall sections stand there as a silent testimony of a battle where the winner had nothing to bring back, and the loser took everything to the grave. The siege war atop the rocky mountain officially closes, marking a mournful mark in the chronicles of human warfare.